Hey guys, good afternoon, or whatever it is, wherever you are, and welcome to this week's edition of Tilton Talks Crypto with our man there, Aaron Tilton, the co-founder and CEO of SmartFi, the man whose name is in the title, and me, and I don't get in the title. My name's Martin Tillier. I'm the head of research at SmartFi.
Oh, but you're
Um,
the most important here when we're talking about this. So
well, I guess this is a kind of a research-driven episode this
that's
week,
right.
so I guess I kind of come into my own here. But this is something that we both know a little bit about, having been in and around crypto for a long time. Um, and the subject that we want to tackle today, and it sounds like such a simple question. It's like, what is Bitcoin? Right? Sounds like a really, really simple question. As you're going to find out as we go along, it's not quite as simple as it seems. So let's start with that question itself. What is Bitcoin? Well, there's basically two answers to it, because the word Bitcoin can mean two things. With a large B, an uppercase B, a capital B if you're English, it means a network. With a small lowercase b, it means it's a currency. I know you have a great analogy for the network side of things that I've heard you say before, Aaron. That really makes it clear to people how it works and what it is. So why don't we start there? So what is the Bitcoin network? I guess is the way to ask that question of you.
Well, the simplest way I think to explain it is something everybody has a little bit of experience with, at least in the developed world, is that Bitcoin is just a payment system. And the way to maybe give an analogy or a comparison is Visa or MasterCard or payment systems. So when you use your card at a retailer, you're basically exchanging dollars for something of value. And the Bitcoin network does that as well. But instead of dollars, you're using Bitcoin. So, in its simplest explanation, it's just a payment system.
Yeah, and that is an important part of it. But it's a payment system that's based on a currency. So I think we should probably explain to some extent what the currency is.
Yeah.
The answer to that is it's a digital currency. Right now, that's an easy thing to say, but does it mean something to everybody? Probably not. What that means is that it doesn't exist in physical form, but it's real. And just like you're talking about the transactions through Visa and Mastercard or whatever, I would say online banking. You go and look at your balance in the bank online, whether it's in dollars or euros or yen or whatever the currency wherever you live. You're not looking at physical manifestation of that currency. You're looking at a digital record of your ownership of it, and that's how Bitcoin exists. It doesn't have that physical thing, but it has that digital record. So there's a record of transactions, a record of your ownership, and that's enough for it to exist, for it to be real in the modern world. It can be spent, it can be saved, you can earn interest on it, borrow against it. We're going to get into that a bit more later. In other words, you can do everything you can do with other currencies with Bitcoin pretty much. So yeah, it's a network. Bitcoin is a network and Bitcoin is a currency. And the two things exist kind of side by side. They are intrinsic to each other, right? Without wanting to get too fancy.
Yeah. That's
So big question, short answer, right? What's next? What are we going?
looks like I think we're going to talk about who created it, right? I mean, we know what it is.
Yeah.
Where did it come from?
Yep.
And that's a pretty simple answer, but again, it has some nuance to it as well as some little bit of mystery, right? And the simple answer is uh, Satoshi Nakamoto, and that's a name that's been ascribed to, publishing documents and who set up the network and all these other things around it. But we don't really know if that was a person, a group of people, where this person or people were based. It could have been multiple people around the world with multiple nationalities. We don't really know, right? It's basically a little bit of a mystery. And we just, we don't know that, but we know what the results are from what they created and the documents they published, and then the code that they created that actually created the network. So Satoshi Nakamoto is the simple answer, but behind that there's a little bit of a mystery.
That's one of the fun things about Bitcoin is that very
Yeah.
few things are straightforward. It is nuanced. It is subtle. There are layers on which it can be understood and everything else. And that's kind of what appeals to a lot of people about it. So, but for it to appeal to them, they need to kind of become more familiar with it. Because one of the questions that I know back when I got involved first in 2014, I was asked all the time. I have asked it a bit less now, but it's still a question that appears quite frequently in online searches and so on and so forth, which is the question: is Bitcoin legal? The answer, yeah, in most jurisdictions, it kind of depends where you live, but in most jurisdictions, yes, it's perfectly legal.
Yeah.
In fact, because it's an internet thing, it's hard to make it illegal. You can try. Certain countries have tried to ban Bitcoin as such, but that doesn't mean that people in those countries don't still own it, because they can own it relatively anonymously, and it's internet based, and so it's hard to stop its spread, if not almost impossible. So it's legal usually by terms of the law in most places, but even where it's not, it's illegal, but it's not necessarily stopped, if you like. I think the reason this question still comes up so much is because of the appearance of illegality that comes from media reports of it being used in a lot of criminal activities. When I first said to people in my family and my wife's family and when they were here in the States that I was writing about and getting involved in Bitcoin, they were very worried, because they thought that was definitely a sign I'd join the criminal classes, right? Because that's kind of what you see it, right? That's completely unfair, and I don't sound like I'm whinging, but it is unfair because it's pointed out every time when there's ransomware and Bitcoin's asked for, used as, demanded, as everybody says, well, they demanded payment in Bitcoin. For the millions of other crimes that are committed online and in the physical world and whatever, they don't say payment was demanded in US dollars, because it's just taken that fiat money is used for criminal activity all the time. So, I think that you get this impression that there's something dodgy or illegal about Bitcoin from some of these media reports. My best thing is, my best advice to you, if you get that, when you hear that, is substitute the word dollars for the word Bitcoin, and you realize that it could just as well be that anyway. Right? So,
Yeah.
I don't know what I have to point out. It's Bitcoin.
Yep.
So, I mean, we kind of, is Bitcoin legal? Yeah, yes, it is. Basically, in most places, I guess terms and conditions apply to some extent.
And a lot of these questions, I just want to point out, were taken from top search requests on, in a browser, right? Probably on Google, about the questions most asked about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So it's not what I kind of thought that was an interesting question. I didn't really have that even when I got involved in Bitcoin, but it's kind of interesting that other people are still asking that and want to know, is it legal? And, roughly the answer is, yeah, it's legal.
Yeah, it is interesting, the things that people ask. And I think what happens is when you work with something, work around it, such as we do with Bitcoin all the time, being at SmartFi, you take certain things for granted that seem obvious to you, and yet if you're not familiar with Bitcoin and you're not in the position that we're in, then they're not obvious at all. And I've found this in all sorts of walks of life, not just in crypto. I've spent most of my time around stocks, currencies, trading and stuff, and their traders have a terrible habit of doing it. Somebody assuming knowledge. And so part of the purpose of today is to try and break through that and answer the questions that people are actually asking.
There's a lot of jargon too, a lot of words that you have to add to your lexicon, but you have to translate that for people to help them understand what it means. Kind of like the explanation of Visa MasterCard as a payment network, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and one of the things I've been working on with SmartFi, if you go to smartfi.com and go to our news and education section, is some articles that give workable definitions for some of these terms. So if we use words that you don't understand today, go to smartfi.com, look up there. You'll probably find an explanation there of a lot of the stuff that you want to know. Right? So let's move on a bit. The next one that kind of intrigued me, again, it's one of those questions that seems so obvious to those of us kind of in the industry or whatever, when somebody said, is Bitcoin a cryptocurrency? And that's a question that's actually asked quite often. I think we can kind of work with this together, Aaron, right? The simple definition for Bitcoin, that was one. We kind of did that in the opening, I think, right? I mean, you said it's a payment network, and that is probably the best working definition. What appealed to me about that question was that actually that's the kind of thing, like people want to know because they're getting involved. They're maybe putting some money into Bitcoin or into crypto generally, and the kind of question that their parents are going to ask is, what is it? And if they can give a simple definition. So I think your payment network like Visa and MasterCard, but using a different currency, is actually probably the best one. Right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things I've heard too, a little bit, not to get too off topic, is where does the value come from?
Yeah.
Right, I hear that all the time. And I think in some of these explanations we're going to have later on, we'll talk about that value. What can you do with it? How does it take on some value? But those will be questions we'll get to here in just a second.
Yeah, and it's it's easy to give trite answers to questions like that, and yet that's not enough. So a lot of people will say, "Well, Bitcoin has value because of math or whatever." Yeah, but what does that mean? So we're going to try and give you some kind of sense of what that is as we go along. But before that, as I said, the question that stood out to me is Bitcoin a cryptocurrency, and that's one of those where I'm like, duh, because I kind of. To me, it's obvious, and yet there are those who are trying to make a distinction right now, saying that Bitcoin and other crypto are different things, and that and so on. So I understand why people would get confused. Yes, it's a cryptocurrency. I'm tempted to say it's the first, but it wasn't technically the first cryptocurrency, but it was the first designed in such a way as to enable it to gain widespread recognition and adoption. Right, so it's the one that people heard of first. A cryptocurrency is a digital asset secured by cryptography, codes and code breaking, if you like. In the case of Bitcoin, those, that's part of the way it's structured, and so it is yes, it's a cryptocurrency. There are lots of other aspects to it. The record keeping is done by way of what's called a blockchain, and there are things like that. And that's part of cryptocurrency as well, is the use of blockchains. That's all stuff that's a bit more complicated, though, and is for another day. But the basic answer to the question, is Bitcoin a cryptocurrency, is yes, it is.
Yeah. I also think, the important part about it is most people don't know how email works, but they use it.
Yeah.
And they understand it, right? They can send and receive data or information to each other, and it becomes valuable to them for that reason, for whatever it is. And so they're willing to pay a service or get something free or subscribe to to Google or whatever they're going to do. And it's the same thing with cryptocurrencies. And as they get the ubiquity of its use becomes greater and greater, the value of it will take on new meaning for new people. So
yeah, absolutely.
Big
and then talking about that value, talk about that concept of value.
Yeah.
The other question that we came across when we were looking at the most asked questions about Bitcoin was, how does Bitcoin make you money, or how can Bitcoin make you money? For me, I came to it, from a trading background, so the answer to that is fairly obvious, but there's more to it than that. And I think you're probably better equipped to answer that than me, Aaron, in a way, because you're more involved in the other sides of the value proposition of Bitcoin, if you like.
Yeah, I think one of the simpler ways to understand how does it, to use the phrase, how do you make money with Bitcoin, is a little bit, I wouldn't say misleading, but it gives you the idea of how people frame this in their mind. You could go down the rabbit hole of what is money and all these other things. We're not going to do that. But just to understand that it is the value, or the way it takes on value and the way you can make money with it, is people's desire to hold it or to possess it, right? And it can go up and down in value. And the desire to hold it or possess it or control it on the network basically is couched in the amount that's available to hold. If it was unlimited and everybody could get as much as they wanted, it probably wouldn't have much value. But it is limited, and there's only going to ever be 21 million Bitcoin. And it has what we would call a deflationary aspect to it. I won't go into all the details. People can go look that up on the internet and go understand that. But in theory, the more demand there is for something that has a limited supply, the greater its value over time or into the future. And that is equated to other things like food, energy, housing. We can see those trends take place in the market. And Bitcoin is the ability to send or receive value to anyone in the world. And as more people want to do that without the constraints of fiat currency or dollars or yen or whatever that is, or other kind of constraints, and if there's a demand for that type of service, it'll gain in value. And that's roughly how it gains in value. And
Absolutely.
in the short term, what you can do with that is people hold it. There's trading that comes up around it. There's purchasing that comes up around Bitcoin, just as you would do with other currencies. You would buy things or you would invest in things. You can do those kind of things. And that's what we do at SmartFi is we make that availability of that value, we convert it to dollars. So you could put it on our platform. And if you're an accredited investor or you live outside of the United States, we will pay interest on it because we can take that Bitcoin and engage it in other transactions that actually generate yield or a return or produce more Bitcoin in some way, somehow. And that's one of the ways you could do it. You could also get a loan against it, and we can talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But all of those things give it value and utility that make other people want to hold it. And in some cases, it goes down. Some cases, it goes up. And more people want to hold it. Sometimes less people want to hold it. And that's really just like anything else that has utility or use, it gives it value.
Yeah, and I mean, as you said, it might go up, it might go down. So to say, well, buy Bitcoin and you'll always make money. That's been true in the past, very much so. Even people say now, well, it's just dropped from 60,000 to 18,000. Yeah, but not that long ago, it was 250. So $250. So
yeah, when we got involved, Bitcoin was $1,500. So since that time, is it up? Yeah, but it's all relative, and
it is.
Depends on what you would call your basis or what was your original purchase price when you buy it.
I think the biggest thing to understand with Bitcoin, though, is that when these fluctuations happen, they're happening on the basis of demand, not supply. Most people are aware of the relationship between supply and demand. It's economics 101. It's something that is just logical. If supply of something is reduced and demand remains constant, then the price will go up because it's more in demand relative, right? And so on and so forth. With most currencies, supply changes, supply has increased and increased and increased. With Bitcoin, that doesn't happen. So if demand for Bitcoin goes up and down, so the price will go as well. Price and value, two different things. Again, another discussion for another time, but I think that's an important thing to point out, that it's limited supply and it's demand that fluctuates. On that basis, and you touched on this briefly there, one of the other questions we came across was, can Bitcoin be converted to cash? That's the way it was phrased in a popular internet search or question. I thought that was interesting because to a lot of people it is cash. I mean, if by cash you mean what we in the crypto world refer to as fiat currencies, that's the regular currencies we're used to, your dollars, your euro, your pounds, your yen, whatever, then yes, it can be. It's freely traded on exchanges, and it can be bought and sold for other currencies quickly and easily in most cases. I will say, not to brag, but SmartFi is one of the quickest and easiest exchanges to do that on, actually. We're going to touch on that later because we're going to have a little demonstration of how you do it. But we're very proud of that fact that it's easy to navigate. It's fast transaction speed, fast registration. Everything is, pretty smooth there. So, so it can be converted to cash. As I said, for a lot of people, it is cash, though. I mean, Galt's Girl comes on and posts quite often when we're doing these and frequently says 1 BTC equals 1 BTC. 1 Bitcoin is 1 Bitcoin, meaning that to her and to a lot of people, they measure their holdings and their wealth and that in Bitcoin and use it for purchases whenever possible. So the dollar value is not really that relevant to them. So it's an interesting question that it's even asked, can Bitcoin be converted to cash? But I think what they mean is, can Bitcoin be converted to fiat? And the answer is yes, providing you're in a decent exchange. That kind of the talk of exchange kind of takes us to the next question, right?
Yeah, and we hear this all the time. In fact, it's probably what people pay the most attention to with Bitcoin is, quote unquote, the price, right? Well, what is the price? And that price is based on markets. And every exchange or every place that sells or trades Bitcoin is going to have a different price. It may not be too far off, but I can remember when we got involved, there was a 10% disparity in the price of Bitcoin in the United States to other countries around the world. And it usually in the United States, it was cheaper in those countries because it was harder to come by. They didn't have as much infrastructure or the ability to access it. It was a 10% difference. And there was people were making money on buying it in the US and selling it somewhere else in a country. It was easy to kind of make that what they call arbitrage in trading. That has tightened up a lot, right? And now that the quote unquote the price of Bitcoin typically on exchanges is relatively close to the other exchanges. And that's no different than a commodity like oranges. It just depends on where they're, where it's traded. Pork bellies, oil, all these other things that are commodities or other currencies with FX, and FX has a lot tighter spread, or a difference in the price depending on where it is because those currencies are used in a lot of other things. So Bitcoin is no different. Right now, I think the price right now is somewhere in the neighborhood of 17,000 and some change. I don't know exactly what it is because it's every second it's changing. And the price has been largely correlated to equities at this point because of it's a risk asset, and typically the same people who are investing in other risk assets, the availability of that conversion is now influencing the price of Bitcoin. It's kind of following the markets, which is a good sign that it has some maturity, right? It has a stable source of conversion or liquidity that people want to convert to. So all that's good. There are other cryptocurrencies like the SmartFi token, like SMTF, has a little different utility and has a different purpose, but takes on different characteristics. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's tied to loans. And a lot of Bitcoin right now is tied to trading, right? It's not tied to payment systems. There are some people that use it for payments, and most people use it for trading, right? And with SMTF, it's really used to fund loans. So when you talk about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin at all, it boils down to its value or its price is based on what is it being used for.
Yeah, and it is a trading dynamic. And far be it from me to knock traders, right? I made a living doing it for long enough in my life.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to understand that trading moves in price are not necessarily. Price and value are two different things. It was Oscar Wilde, I think, who first said the problem with the youth of today is they know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Right? Yeah. And why did I say that in my Winston Churchill voice? But anyway, that's just kind of one of those things that people that people get confused about sometimes, and it's true with stocks and it's true with all sorts of things. The price is not necessarily always reflective of the value. And remember that when you're thinking about the price of Bitcoin, right?
Yep.
That takes us to another, because price takes us to another thing. Is Bitcoin an investment opportunity? Is something that's asked a lot. I'm sure that's people trying to kind of ask online, should I be buying it now? But we're not going to actually answer that question because we've kind of touched on that elsewhere. We've got some material out there if you check out our socials that talk about why it probably is a good time to buy now. But what the interesting thing about that is it an investment opportunity just generally? I mean, I would say an opportunity, yes, but a sure thing, no, because you have that trading influence on price, right? So, but long term, the design of Bitcoin is, you used the word before, Aaron, disinflationary. That means that whereas the dollar's in your pocket, the government issues more and more and more of them to keep up with economic growth. And so the value of each one becomes diminished over time. That's called inflation. We're seeing a good example of it now pretty much around the world, certainly in the US and Europe and the UK. And whereas with Bitcoin, there can only ever be 21 million. The rate at which they are released is designed to slow over time as they become more difficult to mine. And so you have the opposite effect. As everything else, including the dollar, decreases in value over time, in theory, and assuming adoption and some other things, Bitcoin will increase. That has played out so far in the life of Bitcoin. Now, the spike up to 60,000, was that probably trading generated and a bit too frothy? Sure. But people forget, in the current environment, that it wasn't that long ago 4 years ago, Bitcoin was trading at a quarter of what it is now. And so, 100% a year or whatever it is for 3 or 4 years, pretty big return. So the potential is, pretty big.
Yeah, and I think it's all relative, right? This is what we're talking about. It's when did you get involved? What is your basis? We hear that when we talk about taxes or investments or these kind of things. Um, and there is this story about pizza with Bitcoin, right? If you remember, this is kind of the first time that it was used in trading, and we talk a little bit about this in the white paper, and actually not trading, but in what would be barter or a purchase. And there's some monetary theories and things about that. You can go read our white paper if you want to, geek out on a monetary theory and all these other things. It's good. You can go in there. But Bitcoin essentially, some of the earliest uses of Bitcoin, and it's to what is effectively its starting price, where people paid each other in Bitcoin for software code, right? Where they were, somebody had built a piece of code and somebody had said, "Oh, great, I would like to use that code." It was either open source software or it was going to be, or somebody paid Bitcoin for it. And so it was kind of a bunch of techno nerd dudes using Bitcoin in the beginning, and it wasn't really converted for dollars, quote unquote. But then one of the first uses that we've cited is, a guy bought pizza with Bitcoin, and looks like it was, I don't remember all the details, and I think in our notes here it talks about that he paid 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas at Papa John's. They took him up on it. It was worth about $41, for 10,000 Bitcoin. In today's dollars, it's roughly like $18 million he paid for, pizza, like the most expensive food of his life,
So
So
that kind of touches to that long-term value proposition of Bitcoin, right? Because,
yeah.
that's such a crazy number in such a relatively short space of time. But,
And nobody knows, right? And when all this was happening, Bitcoin was so young, and it was just kind of an experimental kind of techno nerd bro thing for people for Bitcoin. But there were some people who caught the vision, took a risk, started buying it, and that's where the price started, right? And then you had exchanges start to pop up, and the rest is history. So it was, it's all good, and now because those people let out and bought pizza for $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, um, or 10,000 Bitcoin, we have the ability at SmartFi to kind of do things with it, turn it into real value and generate returns. Or if you want to unlock the value of it in dollars to reinvest in a new business or something, you can do that. We built these tools. And I think that's kind of the next thing we're going to move on to about, we've got some videos that have been made about how do you do this actually? We get that question a lot about, can I get dollars for Bitcoin or can I borrow against it? How do you buy it? And how would you earn interest on it? So we've got some videos that we can play, and maybe Martin, you can do that first one.
yeah, sure. So that's right. These are the practical side of things often doesn't get addressed when people talk about what we're talking about now. So, they'll tell you what Bitcoin is and why it could be potentially long-term a good thing and this, that, and the other, and the potential advantages of it. We didn't even touch on some of the potential social advantages. You say in the intro to these pieces all the time that that blockchain technology and crypto has the potential to move humanity forward. There are all sorts of things about it that we haven't had time to get into, and partly because one of the things we wanted to do was do what a lot of people don't do, which is deal with the practicalities. So one of the questions that's asked a lot is, again, one of those top online questions: how do you buy Bitcoin? Well, the answer is you have a lot of options, right? There's a lot of different places out there where you can buy Bitcoin. We happen to believe, for good reason, that one of the best is through the SmartFi portal and on the Smart Exchange. For a couple, I say for a good reason, for several good reasons. Firstly, current environment, we're a US-based company, FinCEN registered,
Yeah.
we're stable, we're legit, right? It's number one. Number two, it's fast. You can typically go through the process you need to go through, get yourself registered, execute, get ready to execute trades or whatever within about 24 hours compared to around a week on most other sites and exchanges. It's fast, it's convenient, it's easy, it's there for you. So if you're interested, we encourage you to go there and check it out. Obviously, for the how do you buy, that's what we focused on. We focused on buying through the SmartFi portal, and I know Paul has prepared some video for this because we wanted to make sure that it is a step-by-step guide. So take it away, Paul. Tell us how you buy Bitcoin.
Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to buy Bitcoin on the SmartFi portal in 2 simple and easy ways. The first method is through swap. So once you're logged into the SmartFi portal on your account, you're going to click on swap, which is on the top left-hand corner. Then make sure that you choose BTC in the buy option. And for this example, we're going to use $25 worth of BTC. So right underneath it in the USD section, we're going to put $25. And after that, we're going to go ahead and click on buy BTC. And there you have it. It says well done. That means our transaction is in progress now. Now, if you want to see if your transaction went through, all you have to do is click again on wallet and then click on orders. And then since we use the swap option, this will be a smart trade/cycle. And as you can see, our transaction has gone through and we've purchased $23.41 of Bitcoin. Second method is very simple. We're going to go back to the main page now, and instead of swap, we're now going to click on trade, which will then take you to our exchange. Now make sure that you have Bitcoin/USD selected on the top left-hand corner. So it says BTC/USD. Once you're on this page, go ahead and scroll down a little bit and you'll see 3 different options that you'll have to buy Bitcoin. The first one is limit, the second one is market, and the last one is stop. So for this example, we're going to show you how to buy Bitcoin with the market option. I'm going to show you guys how to do it with the slider. So we're going to go ahead and pull the slider back to 10%. So that'll be $30 since we have 300 USD. And we're going to buy $30 worth of Bitcoin using the slider. And then I'm going to click on buy BTC. Now, if we look on the top right-hand corner, it'll say that our order was placed successfully. And there you have it, guys. 2 simple and easy ways to buy Bitcoin on the SmartFi portal.
Yeah, pretty simple.
It is simple.
Yeah.
Again, going back, I've been around the crypto since 2014. Wasn't that simple back then?
No. I remember when we were getting engaged and doing these things, we had this, little hardware wallet that was basically looked like a thumb drive, and it had a little digital readout. And you had 2 buttons you would click on the top and the bottom, but we didn't have a way to buy it. Right? This was how we stored it, and so we had to go to a variety of exchanges and do different things that were difficult, but, which led us to the experience. I said, "Gosh, there's got to be something a little better." And that's what we, ended up creating SmartFi around. So it was good.
Yeah.
Let's talk just briefly about, can you get paid interest on Bitcoin? And the answer is yes. There's some conditions to that. And these have kind of taken the forefront over the last year about this term accredited investor. So in the United States, you would have to be what's called accredited investor. And if you don't know what that means, then you're probably not one. And you don't need to worry about it, right? But if you know what that means, then you probably have the ability to sign up for our program called Smart Interest. And if you're outside of the United States, then you have the ability to sign up for it. I know it's kind of sucks if you're not an accredited investor, but that's the way that the SEC looks at these things and decides that it's going to protect you from yourself, and that's what we have to comply with. So. But maybe, Paul, you can roll the video on Smart Interest.
Let's talk about earning interest on your crypto. It works just about the same way as I showed you how to borrow on the past. You have 3 ways to earn. So you can click on earn on the top. You could also click on earn on the little icon. And then if you scroll down, you can find the crypto that you would like to earn interest on. And then you can click on the earn button there. In this case, we want to earn interest on our Bitcoin. So we're going to make sure that Bitcoin is selected. And for this example, we're going to put 2.5 as the deposit amount for 2.5 Bitcoin. And then we're going to click on start earning. Now it's going to ask you, are you sure about the transaction? It's also going to show you your smart wallet balance. So we're going to go ahead and click start earning. And now if you notice on the top right-hand corner, you'll see that the funds have been added. So just click on the earn tab and you'll see your Bitcoin has been deposited and is earning interest.
Yeah, pretty simple. And maybe instead of being a little so flippant about the accredited investor thing, basically just means that you have an income or an asset base that is sufficiently defined by the SEC. Right now, if you have $1 million or more in assets, they think that you're smart enough to invest on your own, and that we don't have to register a security for this thing, and you can kind of make up your own decisions about that. And there's also an income base. I think it's individuals at 250,000, and if you're married, it's I think 300,000 or whatever the number is. But you have to meet that requirement before you could engage in smart interest.
Yeah, and it's in some ways I can see that it's frustrating, but I can see why it exists and why it exists for other things. It made me laugh, and I did laugh when you said it again, because I know plenty of people who have a net worth of over 1 million who aren't smart enough to tie their own shoelaces, it seems sometimes. But that's a different story for a different time. The two things aren't necessarily always directly correlated, but those are the rules, right? And they're the rules we operate under. We're a US company, as we said before. We're FinCEN registered. We do everything we can to be completely compliant with what we need to do, and that's one of the things that we need to do. So we do it that way. On the other side of the coin, we talked earlier about Bitcoin being like the other side of the coin. Forgive the pun. We talked earlier about Bitcoin being like other currencies, in that you can earn interest on it and you can borrow against it. And so how that's another question that comes up a lot. Can you borrow against Bitcoin? And so we thought, again, that probably the best way to do it is to show you how you do that on the SmartFi portal. So once again, Paul, let's see what you got for us.
Welcome back, guys. In this video, I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to get a loan using your crypto on the SmartFi portal. Now, once you're logged into the portal, you'll have 3 ways to borrow. So the first option is you can click on the borrow button on the top, or you can click on the loan, which is right down the middle here, or you can find the crypto that you'd like to borrow with, and then we're going to go ahead and click on the borrow button there. Now let's go ahead and click on new loan. And let's put the amount in. So we want a loan for 12,200. We want to make sure that it is BTC. And then for the term's length, we're going to put 12. And for the loan to value, we're going to go ahead and put 70%. Now, if you were wondering what the 70% means, it's just that we'll be borrowing 70% ratio to our collateral. Now, if you look over to the right side, you'll have 2 options that you can select from. The first one is the monthly interest option, and the second one is the term interest. For this example, we're going to be selecting the monthly interest. You can see what our interest rate is. You can also see how much collateral we have to put up to get the loan. And then lastly, you'll see the interest-only payments. So let's go ahead and click on select, and then it will populate our loan details. So here are all the details of our loan now. Let's go ahead and review everything, and then we're going to click on continue. This is going to take us to our loan agreement page, and then once you scroll down, you'll get the option to hit the box that says I acknowledge. And then once we do that, we're going to go ahead and click on continue again. It's now going to ask you to send the collateral that's required to approve the loan. So we're going to go ahead and click on transfer collateral. And as you can see on the next page, we have a pending payout of 12,100. Now, if you click on your active loans tab, which is right next to it, you'll see that once the loan is approved, you will find your loan in there for the 12,100. Well, thanks so much for watching, guys. Stay smart, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, Paul. It really is so much clearer. We could have talked about that for an hour, and we wouldn't have imparted as much information as Paul did in a minute and a half video, because you have to see how you do it. That's the point. Overall, though, I think the message is that it's using Bitcoin, operating in Bitcoin, is not difficult, right? It's just, it can be daunting to some people because they don't understand. So what we set out to do today was help people to understand some of the basic things, answer some of the questions that need answering.
Yeah, I think just to point out that these videos are going to be available on the website as well if you want to go look at those, or you can review this again. But the other part of a little bit some regulatory compliance stuff here is that these loans are typically for commercial purposes, right? So if you're investing in a business or something like that, you're attesting to the fact that you're not buying commercial retail stuff that you're going to be investing with it, or you're going to do something that's commercial purpose. but that's up to you. And that's a regulatory requirement that we have. But as an individual, your Bitcoin and its asset is technically a commercial purpose because it's can be an investment or considered an investment. So what you do with the funds is what you're going to do with it, on your basis. But we're basically saying, hey, you're using this for a commercial purpose and not for a retail purpose.
Yeah, and so it is, again, I want to stress that we take these things seriously. The compliance side of things and the definitions that we need to make sure that people are doing things as they should be doing, and that's important these days. So, and that's why we're still here. When all the others are floundering, we're still going strong, doing our thing. All right. So we talked earlier about SMTF. Want to own some? Well, you can win $50 of it every week with Tilton Talks Crypto. Every episode, you have to be verified on the SmartFi portal. Leave us an interesting question that prompts debate either during the episode or maybe later on, because we go through them all and talk about them later. And you could win $50 in SMTF. So not a bad deal. We do that, as I say, every episode. Next week we have a guest coming on, Rice TDX. Some of you may have heard of, Bitcoin media personality promoter, crypto promoter, media personality. Looking forward to having him on. He's got some interesting views, some interesting things to say. That'll be fun. We might have a slightly festive feel to it because we're getting into the holiday season, even though both Aaron and I are probably more likely to say bar humbug, but I will maybe. I'm not sure that's really right for you. I know it is for me, but I'm actually trying to get a bit more festive these days. It's just, dogs, kids, family.
So you got the sweater on today, so next week you need to be wearing an ugly sweater. Right?
And that's what I'm going to do. I've got a beautiful one. If there is such a thing as a beautiful, ugly sweater, I have.
That works. I'm excited about a lot of the new things that are coming out next year. The DeFi protocols, the DeFi environment for SmartFi. A lot of these things are going to be combined with the CeFi portal, right? That was our first product and the one that we've been building and polishing and making better for the users. And now we're going to enhance that. We've got some bank deals that are coming on. We had the press release, or not press release, but the announcements that had gone out about this deal. We're very excited about that and its use and utility with the SmartFi token, the collaboration with the Komodo environment, and all of these things that are really, we think, are the kind of the next level stuff that are going to be done in the space and are going to be released next year. So super excited about next year.
Yeah, it's going to be a big year. I think it's going to be a big. We're going to hopefully at some point, very early in January, we'll do a look forward to the year ahead, both for SmartFi and for crypto in general, and and for Bitcoin. Talking about here, I think it's going to be an exciting year, 2023. It will be a bumpy ride for Bitcoin and for crypto in general because it always is. It's volatile. That's one of the things that we talked about earlier. It moves up and down very quickly, which is why it's not for everybody, and why these rules about accredited investors and things exist, because you have to be savvy enough to understand what that means. Anyway, all of that said, hopefully, as I say, we've answered some of your questions. We've answered some of the questions that are most commonly out there around the subject of what is Bitcoin. We're neither of us criminals, let's make that because one of the questions was somebody said my arm for criminals, and I've heard that too. And hopefully, as I say, you understand a bit more now, feel a bit more comfortable with the subject, and you can get involved. Right. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.